So we mill our grain, crack it all, mix it with hot water, it sits in there for about an hour. During this time, naturally occurring enzymes in the grain work on more complex carbohydrates in the grain, creating smaller, I guess, strings of sugar, if you will, which are then simple enough that once it's combined with the yeast can metabolize it, and we'll talk about that when we talk about the rest of the cellar. But once that hour has passed, we use the false bottom in the mash tun to separate the liquid wort from the solids, which are now spent. It's referred to as spent grain at this point. Somewhere in the ballpark of 30% of the vitamins, minerals, sugars remain in the grain, so there are still uses. A livestock farmer comes and picks ours up. He's got some cows on a farm down by Louisville, Nebraska. So he makes that trip up very loyally 3 or 4 times, 5 times a week, and picks grain up anywhere from 1,000 to 2,500 pounds of spent grain. And he says his 20 or 30 head of cattle have that gone within 30 minutes of him getting back to the farm. So it's a happy partnership. I don't know what we would do without him, and he keeps coming back, so it must be worth his while. So the spent grain's discarded. We're then left with about 16 to 18 barrels of sugar water, essentially, which is picked up flavor, aroma, color, and the all-important sugars from the mashing process. And then be it beer wort or whiskey wash, that's boiled in the brew kettle for anywhere from 30 to 90 minutes. In the case of whiskey wash, that's just simply to sterilize it before it goes into a fermenter to ferment before distillation. In the case of beer, during the boils, when you add the hops, there's other ingredients that may be added depending on the recipe. Lemon and orange peel go into our Belgian wit. Maple syrup goes into our maple pecan brown. Those are examples of things that are added during the boil.
Who the hell thinks of that?
The owner of this company.
Unless you're Canadian, what the hell are you doing with that?
Making a sweet beer people crave in the wintertime, so hope, I guess.
Canadians that come down, eh?
Yeah, yep. Once it's done its time in the boil, it goes through the heat exchanger, which is the small rectangular unit on the other side of the stairs and the diverter panel there. And what happens there is we take cold water from the cold liquor tank. It cycles through a series of plates with cold water on one side, hot beer wort on the other. The heat transfers, just like in the name of the heat exchanger. So we end up with hot water coming out and cold beer wort coming out. That hot water then is pumped over the hot liquor tank instead of down the drain. That becomes our next beer. The cold wort is then pumped via a brewer's hose to one of our 7 fermenters. That's where it's combined with the yeast. The 4 ingredients are then in place, so we have beer and fermentation commences. Are there any questions at all? Anything you're curious about? All right, let's come down this way just a little ways. Nothing's very far away here. Yeah, it's slick. Be careful. I spilled some stuff earlier, and despite my best attempts at mopping, it seems to be haunting me. So everything you see back here with a cone-shaped bottom or an angled bottom is a fermenter. We have 2 bright tanks. Those you'll notice have flat bottoms. But the conical bottom allows for active fermentation, where the beer in the fermenter is cycling, the yeast is in suspension, and then as fermentation ends and we start to cool the beer down, that yeast and a lot of protein and true matter settles into that conical bottom. We can then pull it off, send it to the drain, or in the case of yeast, harvest our yeast in order to be used in a subsequent beer. We maintain a handful of yeast strains, a lager yeast, an ale yeast, a Hefeweizen strain, a Belgian wit strain, and then throughout the year we'll have various Belgian strains, maybe different high gravity ale strains if we're doing higher alcohol beers. Champagne yeast is used in our Epic Blackout Stout. If anybody's heard of that beer, it's an 18% imperial stout. So we use 3 different yeast varieties to get that to ferment out. And it can be it can be frustrating at times, coaxing the yeast into not going dormant as the alcohol increases. During fermentation, the yeast metabolizing the sugar create three different things. Mainly three different things. Anybody want to take a shot at what those are? Yeah, carbon dioxide. So that's what you see in some of these buckets that are bubbling. Alcohol is the other, and then heat. So again, we've got those glycol jackets in all of these vessels. If left to its own devices, it would rise well into the 80s or the 90s. It's a very exothermic, produces a lot of heat. And so to keep our flavor profile consistent and in the range that we wanted, we've got to make sure to keep a lid on those temperatures so that they don't just free rise. Some beers out there, Hefeweizens, Saisons, are famous for their esters. When you smell them, you might get banana or clove, some of those things that would lead you to believe maybe fruit's been added to the beer. That's all the yeast being allowed to ferment at higher temperatures, and so you get more byproducts that aren't cleaned up by the yeast at those higher temperatures. And so while desirable in a spicy Saison, those esters certainly aren't desirable in a Pilsner, for example. And so some of those cleaner beers, our Pilsner, our IPL, are fermented at much lower temperatures to keep the beer nice and clean and more approachable, really. I get the question a lot, what gives beer varying alcohol contents? Is it different yeast? Is it longer fermentation time? It's all just a result of how much raw materials used in the brewing process. So 500 pounds of malted barley has a certain amount of potential sugar or potential alcohol. If we use 1,000 pounds instead, we're doubling that sugar. And so fermentation may take a little bit longer, but really it's just it's a factor of how much sugar the yeast has to metabolize, how much alcohol it can create during fermentation. Once fermentation's over with, in our case normally about 2 weeks, it can vary a little bit by beer. The beer is then pulled off that settled out yeast and true cake that we talked about and transferred over to a bright tank. We filter quite a few of our beers, not all of them, but quite a few. And so filtration is done in this step between the fermenter and the bright tank. Any beer in a fermenter is referred to as green beer. Any beer in a bright tank is referred to as bright beer, just because it's in its final stage before packaging. It's either been filtered or fined, taken off of all of that settled matter at the bottom of the fermenter. And so once it's in the bright tank, it's cooled down the rest of the way. It's then carbonated or nitrogenated, depending on the beer, and the gas we use to get the desired carbonation effect. And from the bright tank, then it's canned or kegged. We just do our kegging by hand here. It's a pressurized keg and it's a pressurized bright tank, and so you're just displacing the air and moving liquid around just with pressure, carbon dioxide. At this point, you want to be very careful of oxygen exposure to the beer. That's what really reduces shelf life of the beer and degrades mainly hop compounds in the beer. And so if we were to use a pump or something like that, it would agitate it. We'd introduce a lot of oxygen. And so pumps are just used back here to clean the vessels. All of the beers just moved around with pressure.
Do you have an alternate power source? Because I know OPPB is not the greatest power source for this.
We don't. No.
You just rely on that power.
Yeah. Yeah. Hasn't failed us yet. But if it was down for too long, we could have some results. Some fermentations getting warm on us would probably be the biggest factor that we wouldn't be able to control. You know, obviously we wouldn't brew, we wouldn't package, but any fermentations in progress would potentially be impacted by that. Yep. Any questions about this? This area of the brewer is called the cellar. Cellar and packaging. Any questions at all about that?
How do you come up with the names, dude? Like I see Will Skank and Frank.
Yeah, Frank the Tank, Little Skank, I always just say she doesn't get the respect she deserves. She's our small fermenter, but she plays an important role. And I don't know, we're a bunch of goofballs. These three are getting names this week. Zach, our owner, kind of comes up with those.